And then after the table had been cleared, then we would sit, this is truth, we would sit for at least an hour at dinner, usually an hour and a half, and we talk about central things, things that were important in our family, in our own personal lives. And that is what we did. TV was not permitted. You were not, this is the truth, you were not permitted to leave the table until Father said you were, because he did know what was best. You did not begin dinner without Mother first taking the first bite of food, and that is true. It was civil, it was important, it was family-oriented, and it was central to becoming authentic human beings. And then during the day, of course, Mother would stay home, tend to the family, the household concerns. And there would also be in our family, and I'll bet if we took a vote, and I asked for people to raise their hands, those of you who are, I guess, 50 and over now, 55 and over, whatever. In our home, there would also be on the stove coffee brewing, and on the kitchen counter there would be cookies and maybe cakes. Because in the 50s and 40s, people would always stop by somebody's house and say hello, and you'd be invited in. And there too, you would talk about central things. You would talk about how's your family, how's your mother, how's the job going, how are the children doing in school, do you need a cup of sugar? Whatever it was, these were important conversations, and stories were told, and it's in the telling of stories that we would grow and we would mature, and most importantly, we would learn wisdom. Some of that we get, and it is true, with the guys that meet on Fridays. I've not been feeling well the last 2 months, last couple months, because I've got some inner ear thing apparently. But it's fun sitting with the guys, the older fellas in this church, and you learn from them. You learn important lessons from them. And no, with the exception, well, cell phones are not permitted there either. We have more important things to do than that. Concerning the power of slowing down and honestly sharing a personal life with another, I want to allow for a rather lengthy quote from this wonderful book, Kitchen Table Wisdom, by a woman named Rachel Naomi Remen, R-E-M-E-N, who is a doctor. It's a wonderful story that she tells about her own self, growing up with Crohn's, growing up as a Jewish girl, growing up with a highly intellectual family with doctors in the family, people in the healthcare profession, and it's a fun, important read, I think. But nonetheless, I want to share this, and it'll just take a couple minutes, and then I will close this morning's worship service with some comments. Everybody is a story. When I was a child, people sat around kitchen tables and told their stories. Now, I have to say this. Those of you who didn't grow up as I did, this is going to be meaningless to you. But a good number of us here, at least everybody over 50, grew up this way. This is the way we grew up. When I was a child, people sat around kitchen tables and told their stories. We don't do that much anymore. Sitting around the table telling stories is not just a way of passing time, it's the way the wisdom gets passed along, the stuff that helps us to live a life worth remembering. Despite the awesome power of technology, many of us still do not live very well. We may need to listen to each other's stories once again. Most of the stories we're told are now written by novelists and screenwriters, acted out by actors and actresses, stories that have beginnings and endings, stories that are not real. And by this, Dr. Riemann means that you're being lied to. She's being kind when she says they're not real. She means that you've been lied to. So those of you who think that actors and actresses are important, you need to, they're not important, and they're not telling you anything that's important. The stories we can teach each other have no beginning and no ending. They are a front row seat to the real experience. Even though they may have happened at a different time or place, they have a familiar feel. In some ways, they were about us too. Real stories take time. We stopped telling stories when we started to lose that sort of time. Pausing time, reflecting time, wondering time. Might add, that's why I live in the woods. There's too much noise in Bloomington. That's why I don't watch TV. And that's why a bad day for me is when the phone rings more than once. That's a bad day. If I didn't have to have a phone, I wouldn't. Life rushes us along, and few people are strong enough to stop on their own. You notice in the reaching up, I told you this years ago, that now we know for a fact that people are now addicted to their cell phones. And when you take their cell phones away, they go through withdrawal. And yet you still have these boneheads that want to tell you that something about cell phones is good for you. You can see I'm a century behind. Life rushes along us, and few people are strong enough to stop on their own. Most often, something unforeseen stops us, like a disease, like a death in the family, like a broken leg, like losing your eyesight. Something unforeseen stops us, and it's only then we have time to take a seat at life's kitchen table, to know our own story and to tell it, to listen to other people's stories, to remember what the real world is made of. Until we stop ourselves, or more often have been stopped, we hope to put certain of life's events behind us and get on with our living. After we stop, we see that certain of life's issues will be with us for as long as we live. We will pass through them again and again, each time with a new story. Each time with a greater understanding, until they become indistinguishable from our blessings and our wisdom. It's the way life teaches us how to live. Now listen, when we haven't the time to listen to others' stories, we seek out experts to tell us how to live. The less time we spend together at the kitchen table, the more how-to books appear in the stores and on our bookshelves. But reading such books is a very difficult thing than listening to someone's lived experience. Because we have stopped listening to each other, we may even have forgotten how to listen. And we have stopped learning how to recognize meaning and how to fill ourselves from the ordinary events of our lives. We have become solitary readers and watchers rather than sharers and participants.